Welcome back for another video. As you can see, totally different setup today. I have cleared out my dining room because tonight I want to take you through what I consider really the most important thing to get right, and of course that is finding a comfortable and above all healthy setup with our cello. Now, if you look on YouTube at 50 different cellists, you will see 50 slightly different or very different setups. Why? Because ever since we moved on from the Baroque cello and the cello got its end pin, there have been numerous different schools and, dare I say, trends. But I'm not going to go through all of those tonight. What I'm going to take you through is my approach, which is really based on what I consider the best use of physics and good biomechanics. Of course, suffice to say that what that will look like in the end will be ever so slightly different for each person, because by nature no two bodies, or indeed no two cellos, are proportioned exactly the same. But what I want to give you tonight are my guiding principles. Before we pick up the cello, I first of all want to talk about the chair itself and what kind of chair we ideally want to be using when we are playing. So what I've got here is literally one of my kitchen table chairs. I've just measured it 18 inches high or 46 centimeters, if you prefer metric. And that height, I would say, suits more or less most people. So for reference, I'm 5'6" tall, and I'm very comfortable sitting on that. If you're a little bit shorter, lots of my students who come to me obviously are still quite small. All you might need to do is move a little bit further forward on the chair, or if you're taller, you might want to move a little bit further back, or if you're really tall, then it might help to possibly put on another cushion. The main thing you want to look for in a chair is that under no circumstances should the surface of the seat be slanting backwards in any way. So for any cellist, the absolute nightmare is a chair that you often find in schools, sort of these plastic scooped ones. Absolute nightmare for cellists. Why? Because what we never want our knee to be higher than the hip. So if I move to the side here, you can see that I have got ever so slightly got a slope going downwards here. One thing that actually quite a lot of my colleagues use is one of those wedge cushions, which is a little bit higher at the back and then has this wedge going forward, so you're essentially sitting a little bit like that. So I have a lot of colleagues who are using these, and you can get these very easily on sites like Amazon. So my chair here is really completely flat, and that is how I like it. And actually I kind of take it to the degree where if I'm playing, especially if I'm playing a recital or concerto in a venue where I'm not sure that there's going to be either a piano stool for me or a chair that's the right height, I simply put my own chair in the car, because I rather have that slight bit of inconvenience. But be comfortable when I'm playing. So that is the first thing, finding the right chair. Of course, a piano stool is also a great alternative, especially because you can usually adjust it, which means you can really get it right for your specific height. So let's look at, first of all, at how we want to position ourselves on the chair. And I still go by this sort of guideline that I was taught many years ago as a teenager by my then teacher, Raphael Wolfish, which is you have to position your feet in such a way that at any given moment you can stand up without having to adjust your feet first. So you don't want them there, you don't want them there, you don't want them splaying out to the side. You really ideally want them pretty much sort of underneath your knees. Now, I know that while we're playing that some people manage to sit perfectly still. I'm someone, I have a tendency to move around a tiny little bit, but on the whole, that is the guideline. So you want to always be able to shift your weight onto your legs, because if you don't have that support, you will be putting a lot of pressure on your lower back. Yeah, so as I said, I sit reasonably close to the edge of the chair. If you have got really long legs, especially if you've got a really long femur, then you might find that you're more comfortable being a little bit further back, but that's something that you have to experiment with. So that's really the first exercise that I give my students when we start. Sitting like that, and as you can see, if I turn to my side now, you can see that my back is really long. Now, you don't want to be, sort of like that. You don't want to be rigid, but you want a very stable core. The guideline that I give, that I want you to imagine that at the top of your head, there is almost like a sort of lamp cord that's affixed to the ceiling, so that there's always something pulling you up. Especially when I teach children, I find, and dare I say it out loud, it's a little bit more prevalent in boys, that what tends to happen a lot at the beginning is what I call the prawn. This. So, and we absolutely want to avoid that. So always really almost feel that you're sort of pushing into your sit bones here. You make yourself really tall. Suffice to say, it does help to have a well-trained core for this. If you follow me on Instagram, you will see regular gym content there. So, do your planks, your crunches, your push-ups, everything. It certainly helps. So that is first of all how I approach the actual sitting position. Now I want to talk to you about this, and that is my spike anchor here. So you can see I use one which you actually hook into the chair leg. I am personally not at all a fan of these little donuts into which you have to kind of spit so that they stick to the floor. Not only do I find it rather disgusting, but personally I wouldn't trust those. So I like to use this for several reasons. The first one being that I like the idea that every single day it's set up to the length for my chair that I need, and I get consistency with the setup. I don't like having to sort of faff around every day to get comfortable. And the other thing is I like that feeling that I know the cello is not going to go anywhere, because as you're going to see in a minute, I want to have a really flexible relationship, very mobile relationship with my instrument, so that there is practically zero tension. So this particular spike anchor here, again, I think you can order it on Amazon. The one I use is from an American company called Xeroth. Turns out I actually need to buy a new one because there's actually now a hole going through it here, and so you can see we've got very nice wood floors, which I don't want to damage. So this is an absolutely essential tool, by the way, if you are playing, especially anywhere in a church where you've got a stone floor, because if there's nowhere to drill the spike, you will have an absolutely miserable time. Yeah, so this is always lives in my case, and when anyone starts with me, that's always the first bit of kit I tell everyone to get. So, and I personally always hook it into the left chair leg, not into the right. I'll show you in a second why. So always left front chair leg, and then you need to experiment with the lengths to get it right for you. So without further ado, let's pick up the cello. The main priority when I pick up my cello is that I don't want the presence of the instrument to change anything about that lovely, well-supported, stable posture that I have created for myself. So let me explain to you a little bit how I go about aligning the instrument. First of all, I arrange my floor stop in such a way that the spike is not sort of bang in the middle in line with my nose, but at a sort of 12 position. So it's slightly offset that way. Why? Because if I have it right here in the middle, already when you do that, I already start to feel a little bit claustrophobic, because the neck of the instrument is practically touching my neck. The C peg is starting to sort of nibble away at the back of my head, and I generally feel like a little bit like, I'm getting crowded here a little bit. So by moving this spike slightly to this 5/12 position from our perspective, looking down, I have suddenly created much more room here. Yeah? So I have already got space. Now, the other thing that you can see, what I'm not doing is I don't have sort of my legs sort of on either side of the ribs of the instruments, squeezing in and, God forbid, holding it in any way. Not at all. So first of all, that's not great for the sound, but it's also, again, it limits our mobility, and that's not something we want. So what I do instead is actually I ever so slightly bring up the A string side of the cello, and actually my left knee, as you can see, is not out to the side, but it's actually slightly behind. So if I show you from that angle, it's not here, it's ever so slightly behind, which also has a wonderful advantage of ensuring that the edge of the bowtie of the instrument is not drilling into your leg, because that's not a very nice feeling. So, and because the cello is constantly resting securely in the spike holder, or really on its spike, I am not holding anything, I'm not supporting any weight. What you're trying to create between your upper body and the cello is you want to create this sort of shape that's almost weight neutral. So what do I mean by that? You lean ever so slightly towards the cello, and the cello leans ever so slightly towards you. What you do not want is that the cello is pushing you back, so that the weight of the cello, that it goes down here into your lap. Because as you can see, the moment that happens, I'm having to twist my back. There's a whole other video coming on that. I'm having to do that, which we don't want, but we'll get into that topic in another video. So I want to create that again. If you look from the side, you see it's not pushing me back. I'm ever so slightly leaning forward. Cello is ever so slightly resting against my chest. And of course, that brings us to another question, and that is the vertical alignment point, and therefore the length of the spike. So for me, the way I find the alignment, the sort of general rule that I use, is if you imagine you have your armpits on either side and you draw a horizontal line across here, so you end up roughly there, and that's roughly the point where the top of the shoulder of my instrument rests, yeah? And of course it's that side that rests there, yeah? So it's not that side, it's the C string side that rests there, yeah? So you can see that my instrument is not sort of completely like that, it's ever so slightly on the diagonal. The other beauty of bringing the A string up is that it's much easier for the right arm to reach the A string. So you don't have to go quite so far round, you see? Here I'm having to bring my arm up much more. So the higher on the instrument I play, if I have a really sort of high sustained passage very high up, often I will turn it in even a little bit further just to give myself more natural arm weight. And again, because the instrument is resting on its spike, I have that option. And likewise, if I'm playing on the C string for a sustained period of time, I might occasionally go the other way and go a little bit that way. So you want to have that possibility. Now, if you've never been used to slightly angling the cello that way, and if you've always been used to flat, I warn you, adjusting to that is a little bit weird to start with. I certainly didn't start out like that as a child, and it was really only my very last teacher, you know, when I was already a professional cellist, who introduced me to that idea. And I remember when I first tried it, I was like, I never get used to this, but you will. So you've just, like with so many other things that I talk about, you have to let go of the fear of losing control. So again, you will not have more control over the instrument by squeezing with your legs or holding anything. You will have control over the instrument when everything is balanced, when everything is well aligned, and you have freedom. So those are really my kind of guiding principles for how I like to create a good setup. I would always urge you to quite regularly either use a mirror or even better record yourself to see what your setup actually looks like, because quite often there is a very big gap between our perception and reality. Yeah. You will all have seen those memes on social media, yeah? The what I think I look like, I don't know, doing downward dog, and what I actually look like doing downward dog. So, and I can tell you that even now, you know, occasionally when I see a video from a concert or something, you know, I will occasionally spot something that's I don't like the look of, and that will swiftly get addressed. So it's very, very important to always check in on ourselves, and this is really something, the setup, that is the first thing I teach, and I'm incredibly I don't want to say pedantic, but very, very insistent on making sure that whatever we do, and as I said, it looks slightly different for each person depending on how we build, but that those fundamental principles are maintained, because the potential for injury otherwise is simply enormous. And I have, over the last few years, unfortunately, seen even already very young players coming to me with quite significant musculoskeletal problems that were a result of really, really poor setup. So yeah, of course. Lastly, a quick word about the lengths of the spike. So as I said, we find our alignment point here, and then the last remaining question really is how flat or how steep we want the instrument, yeah? And that's really where you see different ideas, yeah? If I have it much steeper like that, you can do that as well. Likewise, you will also see people who play with the cello very, very, very flat. I tell you what, those are permutations where even I have gone through, I've experimented a lot, and I've over time adjusted and tried different things. It will always slightly impact on the way we produce sound, and I would say certain spike lengths are more suited to different kinds of sound production. So for instance, of course, if you are you know, playing mainly Baroque or classical music, where we're working much more with the speed of the bow and with the shape, it's often more suitable to have the instrument at a slightly steeper angle. Whereas if we are having to really project in a big concert hall, and we're having to play a lot of very loud sustained music, it can often be slightly easier to release the weight into the string if the cello is slightly flatter. And that is a bit where you really have to experiment and see what feels right for you, what feels right for your body. I also have to mention here, for instance, I have, as you will have seen across the videos, I have 2 cellos that I own, which are vastly different sizes. This one's quite a large full size. The other one is a sort of bordering Sevenoaks full size Old English cello. And between these 2 instruments, I have completely different spike lengths. So that is really the bit you need to experiment with, but I would urge you to try and do all of that within the context of those general guidelines and principles that I have explained, and then hopefully you will find something that is just right for you. And as always, if it doesn't feel comfortable, if it's physically uncomfortable, if something aches, something is usually not right. So listen to your body and really, you know, record yourself, also sometimes, you know, from the side, from the back, and see if it looks right, then usually it also feels right and it sounds right. My teacher had a very famous saying, which was, if it looks horrible, it sounds horrible. And I have to say, to the present day, he was never wrong. So on that bright note, I'll leave you to experiment with that, and I look forward to seeing you again soon.